Euromaxx highlights. And here's your host, Karin Helmstedt.
Greetings from Berlin and welcome to our highlights edition. And before we get started, here's a short hint of what we've got in store for you on today's edition. Sparkling success, Prosecco is an Italian bestseller. Fashionable fuzz, why beards are back in style. Synchronized sounds, how Robert Wechsler turns dance into music. Well, if you've ever been to the Oktoberfest in Munich in southern Germany, two things stand out. First of all, the beer, and then the fact that a lot of the locals wear traditional clothes. And for women, that means a dress called a Dirndl. And now, depending on the handiwork and the neckline, Dirndls can be either relatively conservative or downright sexy. And now one label in Freiburg, that's in the southern state of Baden-Württemberg, has reinvented them with an eye for the modern woman's tastes.
A modern take on traditional garb. Freiburg-based designer Kim Schimpfle used to draw inspiration for her ethnic-style clothes from far-off tribes, until she discovered the potential of the traditional German dress, the Dirndl, right on her doorstep. The result lends a new lease on life to a frumpy regional costume.
I don't think we young designers feel the need to stay within the confines of the traditional items you find in museums. We mix in current looks from the runways or simply use our personal inspiration. That leads to changes in the cuts or the shape of the skirts. That never used to happen. The hemline is shifting. You can play around a lot more.
Schimpfle's label translates as Black Forest Couture, named after the southern German region where the Dirndl has a long history. Her dresses are made in Germany, all in limited edition. Schimpfle also creates individual pieces on commission. Every detail is painstakingly handcrafted, including the embroidery and appliqué work. But what kind of people wear dresses like these nowadays?
I think these days we're used to wearing trousers a lot. I think it's a big step to get used to wearing dresses again, but once you've tried on a Dirndl, it's easy to become a fan.
Today, original Black Forest dress is mostly only worn during local festivals. Many people like to uphold tradition, but wearing the Dirndl on an everyday basis is a trend that's long died out. Schimpfle hopes her designs will serve to revive the Dirndl. For inspiration, she visits museums and studies old models. She has great admiration for the creativity of the seamstresses who made them.
I think that one at the back is really sweet, the blouse with the sleeves and the little borders. It's also kind of funny that the width of the sleeves can be adjusted with a ribbon. The tradition was passed on from generation to generation. You could adjust it according to your needs. I think it's a very clever idea.
Despite the fine craftsmanship of the traditional Dirndl, the dress went way out of style over the past few decades.
Dirndls were eventually seen as being really old-fashioned. People just stopped wearing them. Now that perception is changing because times are changing. Today we yearn for times past to escape the fast pace of change. Women also like the Dirndl because it really highlights their curves.
Schimpfle developed her latest idea with a photographer friend. Florian Richter sets his pictures against wild backdrops, preferably with storm clouds brewing or fog creeping in over the mountain peaks. Schimpfle printed his images on fabrics used for her dresses. The result, each dress tells its own personal story.
This was taken in the middle of the Black Forest when a storm was moving in from the south side of Feldberg Mountain. It's very artistic how she's done this. You see it in a totally different context. It's fantastic.
It's challenging. You have to decide whether to use it just for the skirt or for the whole dress. What will it look like when it's three-dimensional?
Kim Schimpfle gives traditional clothing a cutting edge. Her designs have infused fresh blood into the old-fashioned Dirndl. The result is playful and modern, and wearable on practically any occasion.
It's prickly on the tongue, lightens your mood, and it sells well, even in times of economic crisis. The most popular version of Italian sparkling wine is Prosecco. That's a refreshing and reasonably priced wine that comes from northeastern Italy. Now, Prosecco was originally the name of a grape that came from the town of the same name. And since 2010, it's actually a registered trademark, which has enhanced both its quality and its profile.
It's after hours at this bar in Trieste and time for a regional specialty.
We have the best Prosecco in the whole of Italy.
And it's very affordable too. A glass costs between 3 and 5 euros, depending on the brand.
It's sweet, light and fruity.
Refreshing.
11 kilometers away is the village that gave Prosecco its name. It's home to 1,500 people, many with roots in neighboring Slovenia. Many locals are experts in the art of winemaking, a traditional trade in these parts. The original Prosecco grape has been cultivated here for centuries, but the sparkling wine it is famous for was actually invented elsewhere, in the town of Conegliano. Writer Vesna Gustin is passionate about wine and has taken a special interest in the history of the drink, including the many local legends surrounding it.
Prosecco is made using the Glera grape variety. It's said that it was brought to the Veneto region by a monk in the 18th century, specifically to the region around Conegliano.
The birthplace of Prosecco is 50 kilometers north of Venice at the foot of the Dolomite Mountains. Its mild winters and hot summers and constant supply of rainwater translate into an ideal microclimate. The Prosecco wine trail takes in a string of medieval churches adorned with spectacular murals. Conegliano, the capital of Prosecco. And this is the wine school founded by Antonio Carpene, the man credited with inventing modern Prosecco in the late 19th century. Giancarlo Vettorello runs the local Prosecco consortium.
This is the estate's lab, which is part of the school. This really is the place where the method for preserving the aromas of local grapes was optimized. The wines from this region have a particularly rich bouquet, better than the flavors you find elsewhere.
Hints of apple, flowers, or even bread crust unfold better in steel tanks than in the process of in-bottle fermentation. 40% of annual production, 270 million bottles, is destined for export. The main wine-growing area incorporates 3,000 vintners. The Faginello family have been producing Prosecco here for 4 generations. The name of their company, Col Salis, takes its name from the sandstone ground.
It's a tough life in the vineyards. You have steep slopes and a terrace-like landscape, and the only way to guarantee quality is doing things by hand. The work begins right after the grape harvest, when the first leaves start to reappear.
The hilly local landscape was shaped by the Ice Age. Local winemakers are grateful for the high clay content in the soil. Back in Conegliano, in restaurants here and elsewhere in the region, Prosecco is also served with gnocchi, meat, vegetables, and fish. The shape of the glass is crucial.
Prosecco isn't drunk out of a fluted glass. You use a glass like this. It's wider in the middle so that the bouquet can be released, and it's narrower at the top to keep in the aromas.
Salute.
Visitors to the Enoteca Veneta can taste different wines. Prices range from €6 a bottle to 24 for the high-caliber Spumante Superiore. Even in times of economic hardship, this bubbly beverage is a bestseller.
Well, if you've been noticing that a lot of men seem to have misplaced their razors lately, you're not mistaken. And that is because beards are in. Whether it's the 3-day scruffy look or a full beard with neatly trimmed sideburns, men are proudly sporting their facial hair as a way to enhance their look. And for the most part, their womenfolk don't seem to mind.
In Milan, Paris, and Berlin, beards are taking over the runways. Facial hair has been made fashionable by such men as Fiat heir Lapo Elkan, Daniel de Rothschild of the banking dynasty, and German tennis legend Boris Becker. Even British soccer icon David Beckham has been seen sporting stubble. The advertising industry has taken note of the new trend. But what's prompted this explosion of facial hair?
Beards stand for masculinity, pure masculinity. In times of crisis, men are required to be men again, maybe. Or perhaps the beard is back in fashion because women are becoming nostalgic for real men again, though that's a bit of a cliche.
Women certainly didn't seem to mind the sudden appearance of facial hair on Hollywood stars Robert Pattinson and Christoph Waltz. The trend has spread to the German capital, Berlin. Men with unshaved chins are cropping up everywhere.
Changes the way you look, so makes you look more manly as well.
Partly, yes. There's masculinity behind it.
Every morning I decide, will it be a little bit bigger, a little bit smaller, down like this, the full thing, and I change it all the time.
Beards are being discovered as second hairstyles. The hair on a man's head is his first hairstyle, and his facial hair, his beard, is his second one. The beard reveals something about us by hiding something.
Model Sylvester Sheehan sports a beard for a simple reason: his career.
It's generally the case that if you follow fashion, you get more work. If the beard is in fashion, then that's how it is.
Sheehan's beard is one of his best assets, so he has it regularly trimmed and shaped by top Berlin-based hairdresser Sean Rahim Khan. You can't wear a beard just any old way. Getting it right can be a challenge.
It can't look too well groomed. When it's too perfectly shaped and cut, you end up looking like the dictator of some rogue state. That looks terrible. It should look a bit more casual and relaxed. If you have a beard, you have to style it in a particular way. And you've got to follow it through. Your clothes have to go with it, and so on.
These photo shoots say it all. Masculine, rugged-looking men are back in fashion. And young men in particular are open to trying a new look, one that can sometimes change the way a man is perceived.
Growing a beard is a fascinating experiment. As an adult, you get to experience a process of complete change for the first time since puberty. You can totally change what kind of guy you are through a natural process. A bland, uninteresting-looking person is given a striking feature. An inconspicuous person is transformed into an imposing figure. That's what's so fantastic.
Men everywhere are rediscovering the beard as a character vehicle and as a style accessory. It's a trend that seems destined to be more than just a short-lived phase.
And now on to something that may be anything but a phase. In fact, it could become a trend, setting music to dance and not the other way around. It's all possible thanks to American-born Robert Wechsler. And as a dancer and choreographer in Weimar, he specializes in interactive performance methods. And his international group Palindrome uses some of the latest biosensory technology to create a completely new dance experience.
When you're here, you need to stay.
Dancer and choreographer Robert Wechsler has been living and working in Germany for nearly 30 years. Here he rehearses with Polish dancer Daniela Komodera. The American has developed an extraordinary form of dance.
I want to make movement audible. I want to make movement into music.
The dancers don't follow the music follows the dance, which controls the succession of tones and light, as shown in this performance by the Palindrome Intermedia Group, founded by Robert Wechsler. Even the smallest gestures can produce fascinating effects.
I've always been interested in gestures. Gestures are discrete, they happen in a short amount of time, and they carry a message, in the same way that a word is a gesture of language.
Wechsler had software specially developed that can transform, alter, and shape gestures' emotions into musical and rhythmical elements.
In this kind of work with interactive technology, they're important because if you connect a certain gesture to a certain sound, we have that effect of a word. Yeah, we have the effect of when you ask a question, you raise your eyebrows, something like that. There's these connections of physical gesture to sound gesture that are very powerful. Technically, it works using a sensor, and in our case, we use these video cameras. The video signal is imported into a computer, and then special software evaluates the activities of the mover. And working with composers, we find ways of using that data to shape and influence music.
It's a new experience for the dancer Daniela Komodera to create music directly with the motion of her body.
You don't have to be a dancer to know what dance is. You don't have to be a musician to know what music is. You don't even really have to think in a cognitive sense, right? You don't need to be able to understand music intellectually to appreciate it, right? So a person can have a disability which limits their body, their physical expression, but it could also be a disability of the mind, but they can still express themselves through music and dance. It occurred to me that maybe there's an application for this for people with disabilities, all kinds of disabilities.
Wechsler's workshops for people with disabilities, like this one in Dresden, show them their potential for further development. And it all wouldn't be possible without Wechsler's dedication to the stage and his method of turning dance into sound.
And finally, when you hear the term old-timer, most people think of classic cars, but the world of transport is indeed vast, and people who are passionate about one form can often get enthusiastic about another. Well, the Klassikwelt Bodensee is an old-timer fair on Lake Constance that features cars, boats and planes from decades, perhaps even centuries gone by. The slogan here is on the ground, on the water, and in the air. And we met up with some collectors who seem to have a hard time keeping their feet on terra firma.
This is a 1943 Boeing Stearman. It's Erich Hope's pride and joy. One of around 2,000 airworthy Stearmans in the world.
They're alive with the spirit of an age, the serenity and technical features, made with so much dedication, expertise and skilled workmanship. It's fascinating, and it's impressive to see the technical achievements from back then.
Hope shares that love of vintage models with his friends Reinhard Kloser and Hubert Hartmann. Most vintage collectors in Europe own cars. Only 1% of them buy old planes.
It starts slowly with vibrations, builds up to a staccato, and then lifts off at a relatively low speed. You feel the air, the wind, and you hear the machine every time you move. There's nothing else like it.
Rolling back the years like this is an expensive hobby. The plane alone is worth €250,000. Add to that costs for maintenance, storage, and fuel. But nevertheless,
it's a joy.
But vintage cars can also move into that price bracket. Reinhard Kloser owns a real rarity, a Bentley Derby built in 1937.
The manual work is fascinating. These cars were all built individually back then. It's incredible how they beat aluminum sheets into this. Plus, there's the way it looks, of course, and the many little details included.
But it's not just cars and planes these guys are keen to collect. At their workshop, they're currently restoring the Duchess of Argyll, a British steam launch from 1883. The Duchess was originally a pleasure boat for the British aristocracy. Erich and his friends spent months of online research and €150,000 on her.
It's a trip back in time. I've seen it happen before. After 5 minutes on board, people completely change. They act as if they're in a different world. And that's what we want to recreate.
And that means restoring every single part, including the original steam engine. The wooden panels are nearly 130 years old. They're cross-bonded with planks made of Siberian larch.
We have a relationship with it. It's great to see the work, and we're sure it'll turn out fantastic.
It's certainly a big investment. In perfect condition, it could fetch €500,000. But after putting in 5,000 work hours, the owners will first want to enjoy trips on it themselves. In the meantime, they can look for inspiration at the Klassikwelt Bodensee in Friedrichshafen. It's a trade fair for fans of vintage planes, boats, and automobiles. And it's an opportunity to meet other collectors, especially with so many deals being made online these days. There are over 300 exhibitors here showing off their prized possessions, vintage boats, planes, and cars. The trade fair has potential for expansion. People first started looking for vintage boats and planes in a big way 15 years ago, and the collector community is growing.
In the vintage car sector, the investment market is fiercely contested. That's the market over 100,000 euros. Some investors are moving in from planes and boats. For most people, though, it's the fun dividend that matters.
And for vintage collectors like Erich Hope, Reinhard Kloser, and Hubert Hartmann, having fun is their main objective.
And before you know it, our time is up for this edition. So until next time, all the best from us here in Berlin, and thanks for watching. Tschüss and auf Wiedersehen.